Love them or hate them, mobile games are finally at a point where they are dominating the gaming industry, both in terms of revenue generated and player retention. This has been true for some time now with games such as Clash of Clans, Candy Crush, and Pokemon Go, but only recently has it felt like the words mobile game don't really have the same meaning they once had. It used to be a term of derision. A mobile game wasn't a real game. You could never play a real game on your phone, but that's not true anymore, because with the recent releases from MiHoYo, the China-based game developer, mobile games have evolved into something with more parity to console games. This studio has put together some of the most revolutionary games the mobile market has ever seen, with both Genshin Impact, which released in 2020, and Honkai Star Rail, released just last year. Both games are attempts to translate what are traditionally console experiences and adapt them into mobile-friendly, easily accessible games, and to great success. Both games have surpassed the $1 million revenue club, and Genshin has even surpassed $1 billion in revenue. Needless to say, they've got themselves a winning formula here, and that is to adapt successful console game formulas and make them easier to digest in a mobile format, while monetizing every single thing about them. And now, MiHoYo has taken it upon themselves to keep pushing their aspirations of translating traditional console experiences into mobile-friendly ones with the release of Zenless Zone Zero, the studio's attempt to translate the character action genre from games such as Devil May Cry and Bayonetta into something anyone can enjoy on the go, with a few other social sim elements sprinkled in for good measure. The game clearly takes a lot of inspiration from other games, both in terms of presentation and gameplay, but it fails to understand what makes those games so enjoyable to begin with. So what does Zenless Zone Zero do wrong, and can it improve? Or rather, are MiHoYo willing to improve? Well, no, I don't think they will. Zenless Zone Zero might be a success, but it's also a massive waste of potential. The game has so much going for it, but it fails to innovate on the formula MiHoYo has developed for themselves and have ended up making a product that's just a regurgitation of the elements that make their products more business than they are games. It's the same thing you've played before, but just with a different coat of paint, and probably worse. Let me explain to you why that is. But before I do that, make sure to click that like and subscribe button down below if you want to see more videos like this in the future. It also goes a long way into spreading the video and getting more eyes on gaming discussions like this one. With that out of the way, let's dive in. Zenless Zone Zero looks to the past with a lot of its inspiration, as well as to the present. The intriguing combination of genres that ZZZ poses is what ultimately brought me in. The pitch poses a very interesting hypothesis. What kind of game do you get when you combine the combat of a character action game like Devil May Cry, social sim elements and time management from Persona, and handcrafted dungeon crawling segments reminiscent of classic computer RPGs? I am a certified sucker when it comes to all of those genres, but combine them into a singular product? Now you've got my attention. But I still understood that this is a MiHoYo game, the studio behind some of the most predatory games on the market, but if they can make a game that I will want to play, then I don't mind sending a few dollars their way. I'm not immediately opposed to free-to-play games, and as long as they're monetized properly, there won't be much of an issue. This is a new game and a new IP. There's always potential for change for a studio like this. The gameplay loop of Genshin Impact fell flat on me after I realized the game required grinding for materials and currency in order to keep up with the narrative. Enemies were level gating parts of the world, and that level gating makes it difficult to engage with the game if you're not grinded like you should be. And Honkai Star Rail felt very, very slow as a game because it was much more focused on telling a narrative, and the combat got repetitive very quickly. I love JRPGs with a passion, but this one did not do it for me in the slightest. But Zenless Zone Zero could be different. Clearly, it's a game where combat is the main draw. It looks great, the characters look interesting with unique movesets and abilities, and I love the idea of a time management social sim on my phone. So sign me up. I'm hooked. Now let's see if they can keep me on the line. At first, it all seems too good to be true. The game starts with a flood of beautiful animation and hand-drawn cutscenes that really show that the art team at MiHoYo is top of their class. Really, everything about the look of the game is top tier. Clearly, all that mobile money is going to something. And after a bit of dialogue boxes, it throws you into one of the most flashy combat systems I have ever seen in the game. All of the damage numbers flying off with the flashy animations are really a sight to behold, and the game does an excellent job setting up little narrative threads to get you asking questions, like, what is a proxy? What are hollows? What's in this little box that we see these goons carrying? All little things that let the player get invested into the narrative. The player picks one of two siblings and is set on their way as they learn about the world of New Eridu, one of the last surviving cities after the world was decimated by the Hollows, these supernatural pocket dimensions that convert the people inside into these otherworldly beings. We learn that with the Hollows comes a new type of society, one where big corporations and the government work hand in hand to try to reconstruct the world into something that benefits the upper crust of society. But the people aren't taking that lying down. Gang violence is starting to spread, and companies are also starting to pop up to retrieve valuable treasures from inside the Hollows with the help of a proxy. That's where the player character steps in. They play the role of the proxy, guiding agents of these new companies to hunt for treasures within the Hollows and complete commissions to earn a living. However, the proxies, hollow divers, and government all have something different to gain from exploiting the Hollows, and that's where a lot of tension comes from narrative-wise. It's a really strong setup at that. It's good sci-fi and makes a compelling case right from the start. So like, is it actually good though? Well, with everything, there is good with bad. The scope of ZZZ is definitely much smaller than what MiHoYo has developed prior. Where Genshin Impact is this massive open world inspired by Breath of the Wild, ZZZ takes a more linear, small scope approach to game design. We're not exploring these massive open worlds or even planet hopping this time around. Instead, we're staying strictly in New Eridu here. Wearing Persona on its sleeve, the areas the player can interact with are these condensed little spaces with some NPCs you can interact with and a few collectibles to find, and that's it. Clearly, these areas aren't the most important part of the game. Noted. Now, combat is a whole different story altogether. The combat is where everything about Zenless Zone Zero comes together. It's punchy, frenetic, zippy, responsive. Everything a character action game needs to feel good is here. Impactful sound design, reactive enemies, flashy animations, and some pretty good music to accompany it. And I really want to put emphasis on feel here. This is one of the better feeling character action systems I've come across, purely based on feedback given to the player. When the sound design emphasizes the character's moves in just the right way, and the way the camera shakes and zooms when you perform a perfect parry and it makes that berserk clang sound, nothing hits quite like this, I will tell you that much. Combat damage is determined by an agent's level, so it does require you to invest currencies to level them up, as one would expect from other MiHoYo games. Characters have different roles, such as support, stunner, tanks, etc., to fit the needs of the player, and they all have elemental attributes attached to the damage they deal, so ideally, you would want to bring agents that are strong against whatever element the enemy is weakest to. Combat itself is pretty straightforward. You press the regular attack button in order to build a resource meter below your health bar that lets you use a special attack. Attacking also builds up a type of style meter that, when capped at 3000, lets you do an ultimate with a character of your choice. When an enemy starts to throw hands, a yellow flash will appear right before they attack, giving you ample time to either dodge or parry the attack. Dodging will activate a witch time slow-mo effect, allowing you to get a few hits in, and a parry will swap out your character to the next, negate damage, and allow for a strong follow-up. You do all of this in an attempt to break the enemy's stagger bar in order to do massive damage. So when you break an enemy's stagger, you are given the option to tag in one of the party members to do a powerful attack that can even stagger surrounding enemies. So what you can do is hammer on one enemy to build up their stagger meter, swap to another, break their stagger, use a powerful AoE tag assist, and that will let you chain stagger breaks easily for massive damage. And each character has their own unique tag assist move. For example, for the starting party, Nicole's tag is a magnet explosion that drags in nearby enemies to where it's cast. Billy's is an AoE Death Blossom type move that damages all enemies nearby and lets you chain stagger enemies, and Envy's is a strong single target damage move but can hit more than one enemy if they're grouped up close enough. You see where I'm getting at here? There's an element to strategy to combat here that relies heavily on positioning, resource management of your special, and the element of skill required for the player to perform combos and blocks and dodges efficiently. There's a flow here that's really addictive, and everything here complements each other so well. Combat feel in this game is polished to the cleanest shine one can possibly achieve. And not for nothing, but every character has their own distinct feel in combat, and they serve different functions based on their movesets. They're all animated brilliantly, of course, and it's fun to see how their movesets complement each other. There's There's an element to team building like any other MiHoYo game, but it's not super deep because move pools are limited and you are limited to only using 3 characters at a time as well. But what is here really does sparkle. This is the best a MiHoYo game has ever felt. All of the right notes are being hit here. Numbers are big, skills are flashy, the game plays fantastically. Another great aspect of the game is the dungeon crawling segments, where the player has to pilot their Bang Boo Bunny proxy through a series of monitors that represent the hollow that they are investigating. Each monitor is a room in the dungeon that is the hollow. The player passes through monitor to monitor as they reach objectives, treasure chests, encounter enemies, and even do some light puzzle solving. Legit, this is probably the best part of the game for me. It feels the most like a game out of everything in the final package because it's a type of game mode that benefits from the brevity. These segments are short, but I think that helps the overall flow of the game, and I really wish there were more of them because they are legit fun to play through. So, what else good is there? I hate to say it, but this is just about where the good ends for this game. And hating on this game does hurt because it has so many elements that I think could work if it were given to a proper developer. And if you do enjoy the game, all the more power to you. There's clearly enough here to last you probably 50 hours or more. And for a free game, I think that's pretty great. But for me, Zenless Zone Zero is really a disorganized, half-baked, expensive mess. It tries so hard to mix all of these genres together, but is too caught up in monetizing every single aspect of it in order to make a quick buck. And so every aspect of the game falls short. Nothing gets to shine in its own way because there's always a rub attached to it, either systemically or financially. Other games do what Zenless Zone Zero tries to do, but they do it so much better. The combat in this game really feels great, but it can't be experienced consistently because combat encounters are too short, and what depth there is in the system does not get to showcase itself because encounters are so limited in scale. A good character action game expands the player's movesets with new tools to let them experiment and to spice up the combat sandbox for a deeper experience. The combat sandbox here does not get deeper, it just gets wider. Characters don't get new moves, they only get buffed. I appreciate that characters are all animated uniquely and serve different functions in combat, but the options they provide don't do anything substantial enough to alter the combat sandbox in any way. For a good example, let's use Devil May Cry 5. Here, the player has access to 4 different movesets, all represented by their own character with Nero, V, Dante, and Virgil. And each character has their own upgrade trees that expand their combo potential. Each combat encounter is designed in a way that lets the players express their playstyle in whatever way they want because of how many skills are available to use for each character. There is so much depth that each character can provide on their own, and it allows the player to find the style they like the most. Even games like Tales of Arise and Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, which are more action-focused combat RPGs, allow the player to swap out skills to best fit the situation and party composition. When I play Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, it feels like the combat has enough depth that allows me to express myself with the character I pick. Not so here. It's clear Zenless Zone Zero isn't trying to go for that, as it's much more focused on being a numbers game first, but the fact that there's nothing the player can do to expand a character's playstyle past boosting damage numbers and getting passive effects to their normal attacks is a recipe that leads to burnout really fast, which is also probably the reason why combat encounters last as long as they do, or rather, why they don't. The developers realize that there is not enough depth here for encounters to last upwards of 1 minute because that would mean the player might realize that there isn't much there is to do other than spamming square enough times to press triangle and then press right trigger to activate your ult to end the battle. Look, I get it. It's a phone game first and foremost, but that is not an excuse to not have depth. Portability is not a free pass for basic ass gameplay. If I can play DMC5, Tales of Arise, or Grand Blue Fantasy Relink on the same platform I play Zenless Zone Zero, I would much rather play those any day of the week. The world of New Eridu has a lot of potential both in terms of of characters that inhabit it, their retro future aesthetic, and how the story uses the world. It's just a shame that the developers don't really do much with the world itself. While the setup for the world of New Eridu is great, the writers don't do much with the concept. It's not really concerned with tackling tricky subjects such as misplacement of the homeless and corporate takeovers, and wants to remain as unproblematic as possible. It acknowledges that they exist, while at the same time saying nothing insightful about those topics other than, "That's not good, we should fix that." The world of New Eridu is just a pretty coat of paint to sell an aesthetic, a vibe, a pandering type of vibe, really. One that tries to say, "Look at this, you remember this, right? Videotapes? CRTs? Remember? So retro!" without saying anything meaningful about it. The playable world feels so empty, and I think that has a lot to do with how small they are. There's very little meaningful interaction to be had in the world other than doing busy work to hit your dailies. Like, take a picture of a cat or go get a coffee. The game forces you to interact with it instead of encouraging the player to take any initiative and explore it on their own, because there's nothing to see outside of scripted interactions with overly long story beats. And the characters are, well, I hesitate to even call them that. When characters in media are discussed, they are often followed by conversations of how they behave, what their actions mean, their beliefs, their motivations, their goals, basically things that make them relatable. Characters in Zenless Zone Zero don't really offer anything of the sort. Characters in gacha games have to be quick glances. The player needs to know everything about a character through one look, their attitude, how they present themselves via their clothing, hairstyle, their posture, all vital tools both in character design and character narrative. Selling characters is hard because characters have nuance. Gacha characters, however, are designed to be appealing first and characters second, and that's really on full display here. I really like the look of Billy Kid here in this game. He's an energetic cyborg with a Wild West thing going on. His voice actor is fantastic and does a great job doing his best Ryan Reynolds Deadpool impression. In cutscene, he chews on the scenery and is animated a lot like a Looney Tunes character, and it's great fun watching every time he's on screen. But outside of him doing quotes from an in-universe Power Rangers knockoff, there is nothing to his character. Nothing is expanded upon, and that's the case for every character. Each character has one personality trait that is blown up to 11, and that's the limit. And when that happens, all the other characters don't have a chance to be heard. Let's take a look at a game that Zenless Zone Zero takes most of its inspiration from, Persona 5. The Persona series really took off with this entry, and for good reason. It combines a social sim where you interact with characters written with nuance and depth, and combines it with a turn-based dungeon crawler. Style seeps from every opening the game has, but it also knows that style isn't everything. Characters are what make the Persona games what they are. They are character-driven narratives at the forefront. We see these characters go through turmoil and express themselves at many opportunities, and by embracing their other selves and their troubles, they gain strength to confront the things that weigh down on them. And that human element is what makes them relatable. I love all of the characters in the Persona games because they feel like real people with real problems. I'm not saying that the writing is perfect by any means, but at least the writers go out of their way to give these characters nuance because they understand that you'll be interacting with them in multiple ways, like combat or social links. And in order for me to care about your characters, I need them to be relatable. It's difficult to relate to a character that doesn't do much other than spout one-liners. And all characters in Zenless Zone Zero are flanderized versions of a trope you already know. Billy is the comic relief that tries too hard to be cool. Andy is the Ray-type doll character who never raises her voice or shows concern. And Nicole is the charming femme fatale that always runs away from her bills because she has sex appeal that she can swang around. You've seen all of this before. Everything is just too cool for you because Zenless Zone Zero is all about being cool. That's the vibe. Don't get it twisted. Zenless Zone Zero is cool. One look is all you need to tell that yes, this game has enough style to serve a whole buffet. But when cool is the only thing being served, you start to get tired of it. Variety is the spice of life, as they say, and that applies to writing as well. But you can't have characters being relatable because that's not cool. You can sell cool. Not one character showed up in my time of playing that I could connect to, and a lot of this has to do with how poor the writing is in the game in general. Dialogue has a major brevity issue. There is a constant need to tell the player everything and not show, and it really kills all momentum the game like this would have. I don't want to be sitting here getting needlessly exposited to. I want to be doing the combat and doing the TV dungeon crawling. It would help if the dialogue was good. It really isn't. It's needlessly overly verbose, and more often than not, it does not get to the point to keep pacing up. Every time I feel like a dialogue could end, it goes on for another 6 text boxes that don't offer any new information. Characters don't grow in these extra text boxes, they're just needless padding. Something in me says it's this way because there's such a lack of meaningful gameplay to keep the player engaged outside of it. Because when the actual combat section happens, they last for about a minute max. Gotta fill game time with something, right? May as well let it be words, because words are easy. Combat, not so much. Brevity is the soul of wit, and this game has no wit. It's words just for the sake of words. Slop that is strewn together for the sake of consumption. And at its core, that is what Zenless Zone Zero is. Slop that wants to be more than that. What's present is a poor excuse for a gameplay loop. The player will spend the majority of their time meandering around an empty hub world doing busy work in order to pump numbers into their character instead of actually using those characters in combat. Going back to Persona 5, the thing that makes it work on a fundamental level is that it perfectly balances both the social sim aspects and the combat, so neither system outstays their welcome, and both sides of the game influence the other. The social links you do in the real world affect your combat proficiency of your team in the metaverse, and the shadows you kill give money that you can spend back in the real world to get new equipment or ways to boost your social stats. Or you can even recruit shadows from combat to become your personas, which boost their corresponding arcana social links in the real world. The systems are intrinsically connected that it wouldn't work if either one was missing. It creates this addictive one more day mentality from the player that makes them want to keep playing. And Zenless Zone Zero does nothing of the sort. The dungeon diving combat gameplay and hub exploration experiences are too separate. Being rewarded with upgrade materials only works one way, and that's just the combat, but there's nothing else to do outside of it. Unless reading text boxes is a favorite pastime of yours, I suppose. Now, monetization is the one dirty word that you know very well if you've played any MiHoYo game. It's not a good word to hear. And it's not a MiHoYo game without the gacha, isn't it? MiHoYo and gacha are synonymous at this point. You can't have one without the other. But even then, the gacha in this entry feels weak by comparison to Hoyo's other entries. There are only really 2 things you can retrieve when doing polls this time, and those are either characters or W drives. Characters are pretty self-explanatory, but W drives are equipables that can boost certain aspects of a character, like artifacts from other MiHoYo games. A lot of this has to do with how the majority of the game rotates around the combat experience this time around. Characters are more unique both in look and how they play. They don't follow a standard skeletal framework that Genshin and Honkai do that makes all of the characters look really samey. So everyone has very unique proportions, height, size, animations, etc. There was a lot of effort into making each character really stand out from the rest. So props on that. It goes a long way into making the player want the character to begin with, because that's the main goal, to make the player want. Because what they want, they will have to pull for. And that's the one standard across all of these games. The monetization systems in place are so needlessly complex that MiHoYo has taken it upon themselves to reward their player base by making the most comprehensive guides they can, so they as a company don't have to do the explaining themselves. It's really a brilliant strategy, using this established community for what is essentially free labor with the promise of free fun bucks for your account if you're voted the best. There's something just so icky about it. It all feels so dirty. The more and more I think about it, it just makes me want to take a shower. These developers are taking advantage of these players to make onboarding tools for free, because what little fun bucks they hand out, which for MiHoYo is free, they can do it whenever they want, the more likely the players they give it to will be to spend money. It's disgusting stuff. Now, mobile games have really come a long way, haven't they? What used to be these little time wasters while riding the bus has turned into something unrecognizable. These products have gotten much more complex over time, but they are also much more sinister. They're not just time wasters anymore. They're basically jobs. Cleverly disguised jobs. When you play a mobile game like this, you can't really commit to anything else. Mobile studios have reached a point where their games are optimized in a way that has you tied to the game for a large chunk of your life. They're incredibly deceptive products when you take a step back and observe how they treat their players. players. Starting them gives you mountains of rewards just for progressing through the main scenario or even doing the busy work, but those tiny rewards start to slow down and eventually dry up. You start running out of things to do, and suddenly those easy upgrades you were getting seem much more difficult, and now you're required to farm. You farm for days and days just to get that one little smidgen of power you need to do the harder content. So if you want to continue playing these games and leveling all of your characters and their items, you are all but required to invest your time into them in order to make sure you have all of the currencies required to progress. Dailies, weeklies, login rewards, battle pass, and any other in-game purchases the player makes all incentivize them to keep playing longer and longer, even if they're not enjoying the game. Currencies are obfuscated to make them more complex than they need to be, gated behind activities you don't have access to until you hit a certain account level, for God's sake. And harder activities require more and more energy as you go for the higher ranks of materials you need. All the currencies like money, upgrade materials, energy to do in-game actions are all tuned in a way where the player gets just enough to get you to come back. Like, damn, I'm missing that 50 money to get that next character upgrade, but if I log in tomorrow, I'm guaranteed to get a lot just for logging in, so I may as well just do the dailies as well to get what I need for my other character. And shit, may as well just grind some upgrade materials while I have the energy, because if I don't spend the energy while it's capped, I'm basically losing out on potential materials. If you can't tell, I don't like this, because Zenless Zone Zero is a treadmill that never stops, just like Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail before it, because when new content gets patched in, because these are live service games after all, the cycle begins anew, and it always wants you playing and playing and playing until it becomes part of your routine. Because if you play for a long time, you're more likely to spend money on things you need. That's why there are so many different currencies. If the player runs into too many roadblocks, they'll be more likely to spend money. And when progress is roadblocked, that ruins the routine. Can't have that. MiHoYo uses this little psychology trick to get their clutches deep into the player with sunk costs that they'll be more willing to spend money on. And really, everything becomes much, much easier if you have money. Even the strongest progression gate in history has no match for the almighty strength of the credit card. It's a similar story to all other Hoyoverse games. They do this really sinister thing where the progression doesn't really start to plateau until you reach 1 or 2 chapters deep. So the players are often at this point where they have invested time and effort into the story and getting to know the characters that they will want to spend money to see it to completion, because sunk cost fallacy is a bitch. Genshin, Honkai, and now Triple Z all have the same framework for progression, so you will know what to expect if you have played those other games. It's the same predatory bullshit with a different coat of paint. A very shiny and very flashy coat of paint. This game had all of the shapings to be a change of pace for MiHoYo in terms of monetization, but they fumbled it. So the game we have today is more of the same bullshit. I value my time and money equally. So when I see a game that asks for both in ludicrous amounts in order to be fully experienced, that's where I draw the line. But there are others who, for them, these games are seemingly all they know. In a recent report put together by the Entertainment Software Association, 31% of people playing games today in the US exclusively play mobile games. Predatory microtransaction trash is all these players know and engage with. They're so deep into the MiHoYo ecosystem that it's hard to get out from a psychological perspective. They crave that next pull because it could be the one that has one character they need to complete their collection. These loot box mechanics are inherently predatory and prey off of the player's emotions to get that next hit. You know, maybe you didn't get the thing you wanted this time, but you might in another 100 pulls, so keep trying. With each spend, you get more gameplay options, so players are always incentivized to spend more and more, because with each dollar spent, that's getting closer and closer to the end game faster. Gambling is, of course, not a very good thing. I'm not a fan, but that is a topic for a whole other video altogether. With all of that in mind, Zenless Zone Zero is really a sad game. I really wanted to like it. I really did. I'm a huge fan of the look the game has, the feel of the combat. There is a lot lot to like there. But it's finally time to come to terms with MiHoYo's development philosophy. They don't make games that are fun. They make games that waste your time and money with the illusion of fun. The experience lacks any depth that would make even the most diehard fan of character action games return. Hitting perfect parries can only carry a game so far, and spamming one move in hour 1 to hour 40, only with a bigger number, is not a sign of good game design. It's a shallow experience that is only held up with the flashy looks of the combat system. Now, being a mobile game doesn't mean you are immune from criticism. You want to share the marketplace with your contemporaries? That means that players and consumers will hold you to the same standard as those games. However, mobile game players have different standards from people that traditionally play console games. They have very different expectations. I think there's an argument to be made that MiHoYo is pushing the boundaries of what mobile games can be with each entry, but the way they monetize them to nickel and dime the player with endless amounts of currencies as a form of gatekeeping progression and gambling with getting the best characters they can is a hard no from me. Just because a game has hot anime mommies doesn't mean you need to spend unpredictable amounts of money to get them. Persona 5 is right there. Go play that instead. If everything I've said so far isn't indicative enough for you, this is just me saying right out that Persona 5 will satisfy most of the cravings this game provides. If you want the social sim elements without all the needlessly grindy, busy work and the great story to make it a nice, neat package, it's right there waiting for you. And as for great character action games, if you thought the action in this game was great, check out Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance or Nier Automata. I promise you won't be disappointed by either of those. Or if you really want that gacha experience without being heckled to continue spending all of your money, Xenoblade 2 gives you the character pulling experience you crave without spending a dime past the initial purchase. Zenless Zone Zero, with all of the resources and money poured into it, is nothing but a pretty face with no personality to speak of. It is the master of none. It's an exploitative piece of media that doesn't want you playing, it wants you spending. And when there are so many other games out on the market that do everything it does but better, I see no reason to play it today. I do not recommend you, or anyone for that matter, play Zenless Zone Zero. If you respect your time and your wallet, there are other games that are much more deserving of your investment. So go out and play those games instead. And if you already played them, play them again. That's better than getting tied up in a predatory mobile game. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think about Zenless Zone Zero in the comment section below. Have you been playing it? Did you feel the same way about it? And while you're down there, maybe click the like and subscribe buttons. They help spread the video to even more people and help the conversation continue. And if you really like what you saw and want to support me even further, you can become a channel member down below as well to have your name featured in the video. Any support means the world to me and helps me continue doing this as a hobby. My next video will be a deep dive into the disgusting evolution of microtransactions. It's a topic that is constantly evolving with news dropping seemingly every day, so it'll take me some time to put together, but please look forward to it. And as always, this has been Testing Triangles. Thanks for watching.